Howdy, Christ family. It's so great to be here with you on the seventh installment of the Postscript of the Heaven series. My name is Austin Pegues. I am the Lakeway intern here at Christ Church. So I'm actually filling in for Daniel. I have the opportunity to work directly under him and really work closely with the Lakeway service. And so I'm here with Jerry today because Daniel is on paternity leave. He and his wife Alex welcomed their second child, Cameron Joe Lumpy, to the world last week. And so he is off on paternity leave now. So as we kind of jump into this, Jerry, you had the opportunity to preach a little bit more than normal and speak a little bit more than normal this past week. And so now that you've delivered all these different messages this past weekend and had some time to sleep on it, kind of reflect, what are your overall thoughts of what you kind of delivered overall this past week from, Lakeway to the Vision events and then obviously the 3 normal services on Sunday? What is your kind of reflection on all that?
Well, when we laid this study out, it was really designed to take the first 6 weeks talking about heaven and talking about hell and talking about the inheritance that we have as followers of Jesus. Right. And then these last 2 weeks, this both yesterday and this coming week, really focus on how this affects my life today and what is going to be my response to what it is that we've heard over these 8 weeks. And so yesterday was really an opportunity to talk about what God has given us to help us make it through these days between now and the time Jesus returns. He has chosen not to leave us alone. And I think it's really an incredible blessing that God has given us to be able to be on this earth with the power of the Holy Spirit in us, guiding us and directing us and setting the course for us and also just reminding us, kind of like a coach, reminding us all along the way of what he said to us through Jesus. And so I think it's an incredible blessing God has given us. And so,
for sure. Yeah, for sure. And so on your sermon on Sunday, you talked about that we live in 2 realms as Christians, one here on earth and then one of the kingdom that's to come and then the citizenship that we have in heaven. And you talked about how sometimes those can actually overlap. And
they always do.
Yeah, they always do, and what that can look like. So how can we look for certain moments in our lives where we see that and just specific moments where we can kind of notice that and really hone in on it, I guess, is really the question.
So it's interesting. When I was a teenager, I played on a football team.
Yeah.
And I was a preacher's kid. I am a preacher's kid, but I was a preacher's kid. And it was really interesting. There were occasions where some of the guys on the team would respond to me differently than they responded to other people. And sometimes I get tired of that. And so, I was in the huddle one time. I was a quarterback, and we were talking. I was calling a play, and we they were, one guy said something, an off-color remark, and he apologized to me for saying it. And in that moment, I responded back with a little bit of profanity, just to prove that I wasn't, I was no different from anybody else. It's a strange moment, but that was a moment when I was a teenager where I had both of those realms that I was living in come into conflict, and I responded wrongly. And I say that to say that it doesn't change the older you get. The venue may change, the people may change, but whether they're teenagers or adults, we have those same things that come, that conflict with one another. I think of a person who's given the opportunity to make a business decision in a secular business, and they have an opportunity to make a business decision, one that might compromise some integrity, but make some money. And they have an opportunity to make a choice. That's one of those moments where our earthly realm and spiritual realm conflict, and sometimes the choice that impacts the spirit realm, in a positive way, it can go make money, nor will it cause that person to grow in their level of influence. It might cause them to end up taking a step backwards. but it's the faithful response.
Right.
And so I think there are a lot of different ways, more than we can imagine, where those two realms come into conflict with each other.
Yeah, and I think it's great that you mentioned it's never going to change. I think somebody younger like me could say, "Oh, it's going to change over time."
No,
but,
it's not.
It's really great to remember that.
In fact, the more faithful you are, I believe, the more conscious you are about living a faithful and a spirit-filled life, the greater the warfare will be against you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that's important to remember when we are faced with those conflicts and the warfare that's going to come after that. So then another thing you talked about, you asked this really powerful question on Sunday where you talked about what's influencing our lives.
Yeah.
And what's the influencing force. And, for some people that could be money, that could be popularity, that for students be grades. How do you think is a way that we can kind of identify what is influencing our lives in a real way, kind of in retrospect, looking at our life, how we can identify what is, controlling our lives?
The less you know Jesus, the more difficult it is. The more you know Jesus, I think, and the deeper you are in relationship with Jesus, the easier it is to draw those distinctions at times, I think. I know that there have been times in my life when the controlling influence over my life was being liked. I still struggle with that.
Yeah.
I was a performer. And there were times where the controlling influence in my life was the applause. And so I would live and act for applause. And I think it's different for everybody.
Sure.
But I would say that, you remember those wristbands that people were, what would Jesus do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I think those are corny, but I think they make a point. If you were to ask yourself, how would Jesus respond in this situation? And is my response in concert with how I think he would respond? I mean, that's a litmus test right there.
Right.
So I think there are a lot of ways that we can process certain decisions and actions that can lead us to make those faithful.
Yeah, just to think
responses.
through those actions of like you said, what would Jesus do? And that if your action isn't aligned with that, maybe that's the controlling force right there, whatever your action was going to be.
Sometimes at the end of the day, if you look back over your day and the decisions you've made and the actions that you've taken and things that you've done, if you were to, at the end of the day, just go through those activities, Lord, was I faithful to you?
Yeah.
Those are some ways that can help you
Right.
kind of gain perspective, important perspective, I think.
Yeah, that's a really, really great way to do it. And then kind of the last question I had for you was, you talked a lot about C.S. Lewis' book, Mere Christianity. And there's some beautiful quotes in there, but you talked about, Lewis writes that really the biggest challenge for Christians is the first moment when they wake up in the morning.
Absolutely.
And there's these things that are going on throughout the day that are going to be demanding, our time and our focus, and they all come to fruition right there
right.
when you wake up, the stresses of the day. And our biggest challenge as Christians is to push back on that for a second and just to focus on the Holy Spirit, on the Lord for that moment and align with Him. And so I know that's a struggle that I have in my own life, is to find that moment in my morning and to find that moment when I wake up. So what's a practical way that you do that in your own life and implement that in your own life and have found success with that?
So I'm not successful in this 100% of the time, but I would say that I'm successful at this 85% of the time. So, and it was about 50% of the time, and it was about 25% of the time, and it was 0% of the time at one point. And that is, before my feet touch the ground, I go to God in prayer. Before I physically get out of bed, I spend time with the Lord. I am not those of you who know me know I am not a social media person. So Facebook doesn't get me. Instagram, I don't spend time with that. I do read emails and get texts, but I really try to make it a point to not pick up my phone the moment I wake up, but to spend some time just in prayer. Just asking God to guide me, to lead me, to order my steps during the course of the day. Sometimes it's a simple prayer. Sometimes it turns into a 5-minute long prayer. But those times are very, very important.
Yeah, and just a simple prayer, like you said, can just help us align just our simple, just our day-to-day life with what God has for us by I think I know in my own mind that we say we're so busy or we don't have time, but just a simple prayer can really change the day and just change what the controlling factor is in our life.
Absolutely.
For that day. So,
Yep.
I think that's all we have. And just thank you guys for joining us. And we hope that this kind of flows some conversation into your studies this week, and hope you guys have a great week.
Thanks, Austin, for stepping in for Daniel.
Yeah.
Y'all have a great week.